This is Queued Up, where we amplify the voices of educators with the science, soul, and story shaping education. So, in your career, what you've done is you've specialized in helping leaders and have those meaningful conversations. So, I want to talk a little bit about that today. And I would love it if you could share a difficult conversation that you've had. And not only that, what happened that changed everything within that conversation?
So I've really been working on this for a long time, right? As a teacher, you're trying to figure it all out. You're looking at these great educators and leaders who just seem to know how to connect and approach people and have difficult conversations. And then as a principal, the conversations get a little more risky, a little more difficult. When I went to district office, I did teacher negotiations. We dealt with terminations and just investigations and really difficult stuff. So through my career, I've always thought that this is really important. Like this is it. It can kind of make you or break you if you're able to really connect and build trust and have difficult conversations. My first year of being a principal, I watched a teacher, a brand new teacher, have a difficult conversation with such grace and skill. And she was a first-year teacher.
Wow.
And I learned from her, and I thought from her, there was so much there. And I think that as I reflect, I think that's when I really started thinking, this is really important. And what happened was a parent called me. I was the principal. And a parent called me and she was really upset with a teacher. And she was yelling and she was cussing over the phone. And she told me that this teacher had hit her child and put her under the table and made her miss lunch and all these things that I knew weren't true because I was in that classroom a lot. But she was very angry. She was very upset. And it was the first time I had really dealt with a really angry person. I mean, I was the teacher that brought my guitar to school and sang with the kids and played with them at recess. And nobody ever really got mad at me, right, as a teacher back in the 1980s. So as a principal, I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do?
Yeah.
So I went to the teacher first. I told the parent, thank you for contacting me, and I'm going to talk to the teacher, and we will get back to you. So I went to the teacher, and she said, oh, Patty, I'm so glad you told me about this. She said, can we go call this parent back right now? I want to call her back right now. And I was like in protective mode.
Yeah.
I thought I'm going to
Pretty
be
bold.
really. Yeah. And I'm like, you need me in the room and you need me to help you. And she was cussing and, I want to help you through this. Well, the truth of the matter is she did not need any help from me. She knew how to do it. She was a really neat person and a great teacher. And I watched her call this parent back. And she said, Miss Coram told me about your concerns, and I'd like to hear you tell me what's going on. And the mom shared all this with her and was really angry. And this teacher, Miss Brown, just listened, took notes. She said, thank you for telling me this. I mean, this is stuff that's not true.
Right.
And
you would think you would want to defend.
right.
Like, I didn't do that.
Right.
Like, why would you believe me about that?
Be defensive, be angry. She didn't do any of that. She listened, she took notes. And at the end of the mom sharing all of this, she said, I'm so glad you called school. These things are not happening at school. However, the important thing is that the little girl is coming home and saying it is. And she said, that means we have a real problem. And she's not feeling comfortable with me. And I need to make some changes and do some things. I mean, she just embraced the emotion that the mom was feeling. And she said, would you come to school and let's talk? I want to show you our classroom. I want to show you where she sits. I want to show you where she eats lunch. I want to show you what happens when she gets angry at school and what we do about that, and see if you have better ideas for me.
Wow. And that mom felt so heard.
So heard. And she came to school and they met and they became best friends, and they, not literally, but, at school, the mom never called me again. I was no help. This teacher,
You're like, you were over there taking notes. Like, okay, hold on. We'll say that part again.
right. Yeah. I remember at the end of one of her visits, Miss Brown said to the mom, I am so glad you made that first phone call to our principal. And she said, in the future, I hope you feel comfortable now calling me, But she said, "But
Yes.
if you don't, keep calling Patty because she'll come and tell me." And she gave me credit, which I didn't deserve, but, it was just like she handled it with such grace and
Yeah.
such compassion because she knew the goal was to build a relationship with this mom.
Yes, because it's gonna be a long year without that
Right,
relationship.
right. And she didn't really have to defend herself. She just needed to embrace the emotion that was happening at the time and try to understand where it was coming from and then build that relationship and trust so they could have honest conversations.
What an empowering story too. I hope I hope that someday I can get to that place. I mean, I can listen a lot, but then there's times where my emotions sneak back in,
Yeah.
and to hear those tough things about you and to make that person feel heard and valued, even though it wasn't true, that is impressive. So another question I have is you've grown with small businesses through ups and the down cycles. And what business playbook would you say best transfers in a classroom?
So I talk a lot about lifelong learning.
Mhm.
And if that business invests in themselves,
Mhm.
that they will win far more. So it's the same deal in education. If the kid will invest in themselves and put the time in to read extra and work on their math more than just the time they spend in school, it's the investment in themselves that will win. And that's where you see the people
Yes.
that really win, they invest in themselves.
Yes, and you did. I remember reading some information that you had shared, and you were talking about investment into yourself
Yep,
and that educational experience.
it is.
And you're right. That doesn't is it return void? Is that the phrase? Of like that does not return void. I mean, you get return on your investment when
You
you invest in yourself.
you truly get it, and it might not be quick, but you're going to get a return in investment. And two, I would love to see people spend more time teaching kids that life's going to be hard.
Really?
I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to be.
Life
Yeah.
is hard.
Yep.
Yeah. I actually recently shot a podcast with Dr. Patty Gorham, and that was literally like, she's like, life is hard. Once you accept that, then you can figure out what you're doing
You
next.
can. Life
Yeah.
is very hard, but the time you spend on your education, no matter what you do, is great time. And so,
Yeah. It's that resilience.
oh,
It's that getting up early, feeding the calf. It's those things. But you have to have that, I think, to be a good investor in the future in your finances and all of that. It's the resilience. It's doing the hard thing.
doing the hard thing. And we had talked earlier. I didn't go to college till I was 25,
Mhm.
and literally, I probably grew up a little slow. I needed to be. I did not need to go to college till I was 25.
Right.
But I also had my son when I was 25. And
Okay.
so my wife worked nights and evenings. So my two boys give each other a hard time. The youngest one tells the oldest one he had to go to college twice because he went once with me because I carried him. I had a book bag, a diaper bag, a kid, and I went to school with
Oh,
him
wow.
every day when I was in college. And so I carried him around and changed him between classes. And so their joke now is, hey, you had to go to college twice. He went
Did
once
he
when he
get a
was little.
degree the first time
He
through?
did not, but I did. So
There's so many people that would never do that. What pushed you to do that?
life is hard. You better
Life is
figure out,
hard.
you better figure
Yeah.
out how to make it work. But there were great, impactful people that provided the education. It was like, if I'm going to get to where I want to be, I have to have the
Mhm.
education. And I think that's what really pushed me to be a lifelong learner. And
Right.
so lifelong learning is going to win in the long run. And hopefully the impacts we make on the kids early, i.e. the teachers, is going to really impact them to want to be lifelong learners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You don't happen to have any pictures of you and your little guy during that time, do you?
I'm sure they're out there.
I would love to see, like, your
Yeah.
backpack and your diaper bag
Yeah.
and a kid on the hip as you head into your college
I
class.
remember English Comp 1. I cannot remember that instructor. He was a graduate assistant. And he goes, get up here and write your son's name on the board. He goes, that's going to be the first time you ever wrote your son's name. And it was like, that's actually pretty cool.
That is
And
cool.
then he did his lesson based on that. And lots of people really paid attention. And so, again, how your educator is so impactful on
For
what you
sure.
do. And so, really cool deal. Yeah.
Before we continue, this episode is sponsored by Q360 Workforce Solutions. If you're a leader listening, you already know the problem. Q360 helps districts get ahead of the staffing and support gaps. This isn't about looking good on paper, it's about keeping schools steady. All right, back to the conversation.
Teachers are vital to these, at the time, children's lives, turning them into functioning adults of society.
Absolutely.
And as somebody who lives it every single day, the gratitude that not only I have, but my family has for educators, I mean, there's no words. I know we're on a podcast to talk about it, but there's no words to explain what an impact these educators make.
Yeah, and I know when we were chatting before, we were talking about how as siblings, sometimes you wanted to get in there and just fight, and want to defend and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember I wasn't very old when Drew was school age, like when he was in elementary school. I was in college and I was learning a lot about IEPs and advocating. And then he was a little bit older. And so I was the teacher. And I remember talking to your mom and getting really frustrated and wanting to go in and just, that sister. Did you ever have moments like that where you're just like, oh, I want to.
Oh, yes. I will never forget. And it still makes me mad to this day. It had nothing to do necessarily with any educators, but I remember hearing from a friend. So again, my brother and I are about 5 years apart. So I remember hearing from a friend that their older sibling told them that one day Drew was at lunch and he had some mashed potatoes on his hat. It happens. He, when you eat, things get a little messy sometimes. And kids are making fun of him.
Ooh.
It took everything in me not to go be like, who is doing this, and I'm not okay with it.
Throw down.
And like I said, we've always had that in common, that just protectiveness. And I know that's carried you very much in your career to still have that.
Oh, yeah. And the thing of it is like as siblings, we kind of get into that fight mode. We feel like we got to step in and fight. And I know you do as a parent too, because I'm a parent now. But your mom was always so gracious. Even when, like you mentioned, maybe they weren't always the best positive story, but she was always so gracious to the educators. And that meant a lot to me, even though I wanted to fight them.
I think her standpoint a lot, and of course I don't want to fully speak on her behalf, but these are the moments that I've taken away from her. Everybody does have their own story. What if they're having a bad day?
Yeah.
What if the educator just doesn't know yet? What if she can be the person that uses grace and compassion to help teach them and fuel them to be a better educator?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of parents should battle for their kids and fight and stand up. But I think that's something that I've taken away from her, is just being able to fight with grace at the same time.
You know what? Both of your parents have always been full of grace. That is the way I would sum them up. And I think that it's fun, since I know them personally, and then getting to see them through the short clips and things you're doing. I mean, just like you said, the chicken. There was grace for Drew because she's like, did you do it? I mean, like, she's not making any assumptions. She's not making any judgments. And I love that shines through.
Well, thank you. I know they've always been appreciative of people like you, though, as well, from the standpoint of you have never once judged them for the way they parent. Because parenting is hard regardless if your child has special needs or not. Now, while I may not be a parent, I can still vouch for that. I know that's got to be difficult. But it's people like you who are like, you know what? Even if I wouldn't have made that exact same decision as a parent, I still think you're doing the best you can.
Right.
So it says a lot when they have a support system of people like you who just have grace as well. And the urge to fight.
Yeah. I'm like, we can be nice or we can fight. Which one do you want to do? I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I know that you and I are similar in that. Like,
Yes.
Okay, let's do this. So one of the focuses that I have, and I mentioned it earlier in our conversation, is the amplifying the voices of educators. I feel like, we talk about the science of learning. We talk about the things that we do. We talk about test scores. We talk about all those things. But I want to hear the soul of people, the stories, all of that. Do you have any story that has been impactful to you, that you've seen the change of, that behavior shift, that change and the outcomes? I would love to hear something that you've seen.
Yeah. So many great stories I take away from the schools that I work with, because when they're given that agency and that autonomy to not only discover the solutions, but create the really creative shared learning opportunities, they come up with incredible things. So one district I'm working in right now, they are trying to address mattering and to improve mattering in their school, but by creating pillars for radical love. They started asking, who here radically loves our children? And so we started to go in and watch these classrooms where students were radically loved. Yeah, I just saw some of the most creative ways to engage students in creating like a culture of care in the classroom where, if Shania said something, they would say, go Shania, and the whole class would like go, cheer on. And then asking for, an answer from the whole class. And this teacher in particular, Miss Glover, she would say, do you need to phone a friend? So if they needed help, like this just the reliance on each other, this culture
Building the
of care.
community.
Yeah. So those situations I love, finding, these pockets of radical love, teachers who are, creating a sense of joy but rigor. So how they're creating fun and engaging ways for kids to learn content, keeping them, really on the rigor path, but with joy. No,
Right.
who's creating joy in classrooms? Let's find them, One particular teacher in that same school, this is a school called Phillips Academy Charter. It's in Newark, New Jersey. And we went into observing this teacher really created the sense that students owned their learning. So they were almost doing like a speed dating. They had, materials where they were reading off of, and somebody was the person who was the expert. Somebody was the person asking questions, and they would ask each other questions, and that expert would answer and respond. And then the speed dating was up. They would move to the next person. It was another topic. And it was a way for them to like test their learning and learn from each other because the expert could expand on it. But just incredible ways of having kids learn from each other and be owners of their learning.
Right.
Like if we're going to change the game in education at this point, we have to abandon the systems that have gotten us this far that aren't working anymore because kids know it. And the gig is up, right? The reason why we're seeing kids kind of misbehave and the behaviors go through the roof is because the system doesn't work for the kids that we have today in those seats. And what that requires of educators is that we also have to realize that our role has changed. We used to be the holder of all the knowledge. They had to come to us. That's not the way it is right now. Kids can get information anywhere. It's at their fingertips. And so we really have to shift to being these kind of like co-journeyers with children. We're on this journey with them and we're creating experiences where they can kind of develop their own wisdom.
Yeah.
And we have to be like kind of co-travelers with them. That's how I am as a therapist. I always feel like I'm a co-traveler with people. And I think for educators, it would really help us to release that sense that we know everything and that we should, and then they need to come to us to know it all and be co-travelers with them on their journey of learning.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to Queued Up. Follow and subscribe to stay queued up for what's next.